Hey everyone, it is Thursday, and you know what that means. That means we bring back our expert, Jonathan Twomley. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing very well. How are you?
I'm doing great. We saw what I would perceive to be a pretty scary unemployment number this morning. New claims didn't quite hit a million, but damn, got close. 965,000. Did you see that number this morning?
I did indeed see that number, and so here it is once again. You got it right. Wall Street got it wrong. Uh, the the expected number was 800,000,
Yeah.
and it's 965 instead. And color me not shocked by this. This is where really expected things to be going, given the surge of COVID cases that's going on and the restrictions that have been coming into play. Now, the restrictions, the the most of the upswing in unemployment has come from states with more restrictions. However, just given the number of COVID cases throughout the country, it is also affecting states that have not been as restrictive. So there was big surges of unemployment in Texas and Florida, just as uh, because people are just not going out, right? Because of the
Yeah.
surging cases. So um, hospitality took a huge hit, uh, and it continues to suffer. And so this is
Yeah.
not welcome news. Meanwhile, Wall Street celebrates everything that happens. For as far as Wall Street is concerned, everything is great, right? Unemployment rises. Okay, that means we'll get more stimulus. It'll go up.
Yeah.
Unemployment falls. Okay, that companies will make more money. It'll go up. So nothing can nothing can derail the stock market at the moment, except when it just stops for
Yeah.
whatever reason.
Yeah.
Um, so,
Yeah.
but
This,
yes, unemployment is clearly clearly a big issue, and we know that more stimulus is coming. I think that's why people are not freaking out about it yet. But there is, I saw an article today on Seeking Alpha arguing that the last stimulus bill, the 900 billion that was passed, is too little, too late to arrest what's going on, because the real issue is getting COVID under control, right? And um, which, as I've mentioned on this show before, when I had Ryan Severino, who's the chief economist for Jones Lang LaSalle, on my mastermind day in October, he said repeatedly, the recession is the pandemic. Until we whip the pandemic, we will not fix the recession. And I think that continues to be true. In it, Either the vaccines get rolled out and we finally whip it, or we conjure up the political and social will to just bite the bullet and do something about it. Uh, but until either one of those things happens, we're just going to be in this holding pattern of continuing unemployment claims, uh, and an economy that is on life support.
yeah. I think there's a couple of things in this number that are truly horrific. I mean, and the number's bad. I think there's a couple of things kind of underlying it. First off, the fact that Wall Street got it wrong by 20%. They
Right.
expected 800 and came in at 965. The other thing is, I think this validates the trend that you and I have been talking about since Thanksgiving, right? Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, it's a very noisy data collection, right? Holiday shutdowns, data collection at the state level. I think the trend is clearly up, and I unfortunately think it's accelerating, at least
Mm.
for the next probably 4 reporting cycles. I do think we're closer to the end than the beginning. I mean, I think that's good news. I think but still, it's going to be a pretty weak Q1. I agree. The 600 or the 900 billion or $600 unemployment and wasn't enough. Too little, too late. But I think there's a very good chance, and I think we hear tonight from Mr. Biden, or President-elect Biden, about likely a $2 trillion or more stimulus plan. And the one thing I could say for sure is this bad unemployment data, and that's on back of bad December numbers, right? It was negative
Mm.
165,000 when they expected a growth of 80,000. Could mean, could mean that a $2 trillion plan gets through the House and the Senate before the end of January. I
Mm.
mean, it could be, kind of day one activity. And he's setting it up that way, right? He's going to announce it today. He's already going to start working and negotiating, I am sure. But yeah, I mean, God, it's another 2 trillion on top of 900 billion on top of 3.3 trillion. I mean, it's got to be like 15, 18% of GDP at this point. It's crazy.
Yeah. So we did, some of you are aware that I did my quarterly mastermind day yesterday, and one of the one of the panelists is my friend Bruce Frazier, who is a very successful distressed asset syndicator, and he he has a degree in economics, and he also runs a hedge fund. He's very on top of economic data,
Mhm.
and he said something that really surprised me, which was that the US, as a percentage of its, now we're always, you know looking at Europe and saying, oh, look at those, socialist countries, how much money they spend, how high their taxes are, et cetera. He actually said that as a percentage of GDP, the United States has put out much more stimulus and gone into much more debt than the European countries have, which I was really surprised to hear.
Interesting.
And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that what they did in Europe essentially was just send everybody checks, right?
Yeah, very
They
clearly Europe
Yeah,
Europe was about the people. Yes.
yeah. So they didn't have like these kind of ridiculous, like frankly open to all kinds of corruption kind of programs like PPP,
Mhm.
and that just like layered on all, like I've been thinking a lot about this recently. It seems to me like, if you had to do this all over again, and frankly I hope that what's happening in Washington now is that people are saying, hey, a pandemic could happen again. If it happens again and we have to have shutdowns again, what kind of stimulus package are we going to pass that's responsible but also like clean uh, and efficient, right?
Yep.
And if I were to do that myself, trying to think about what that would look like, I think it would basically be like rent payments for businesses,
Mhm.
and then checks to individuals, and that's it. Like none of this stuff like, oh, we're going to give money to businesses so that they can pay their employees if they keep them employed, and like just let's just say, okay, this thing takes 2 weeks to spread.
Mhm.
We're going to shut the whole thing down for a month, and
Yep.
we're going to support everybody for a month,
Yeah.
right?
No
And
gaps. Yep.
no gaps, just like shut down, stay home for a month, and we're just going to pay you to stay home. And for all your businesses, we'll pay your rent for a month, right? I mean, that seems to me would be
Yeah.
so much cheaper and less restrictive of personal freedom, to the extent that that's what some people are really concerned about,
Mhm.
than like the way that things got rolled out, like
Yeah.
hodgepodge. And granted, like people,
Who's essential, who's not essential, the big stores win, the little ones don't. It's just
yeah, all
crazy.
that kind of stuff. I mean, it should have just been, I mean, they could figure out very easily some kind of like income test or business size test, and say anybody, above this line, you're not getting anything. Anybody below or they can graduate it or
Yeah.
whatever. And the same thing with incomes. They can say, hey, look, if you were making $1 million a year, like
Yeah.
you don't need $2,000,
Yeah.
a month or whatever. But for everybody else, send them, the a payment to stay home for a month, and let businesses just go on vacation for a month
Yeah.
unless they're essential, right? So supermarkets and that kind
Yeah.
of stuff,
Pharmacies and stuff. Yep.
and then shut everything else down. And that would have cost us, I think, a tiny fraction of what we wound up spending.
Agreed.
And just if you just shut it down, we could have like whipped the thing,
Yeah.
before,
To
like New Zealand did, right?
Yep.
So
Oh yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah. The one thing that would be interesting me today is and again, it was funny. Goldman came out last week and said, "Oh, we expect Biden to come out with a $600 billion stimulus," and I freaking laughed in my daily financial news. I said, "I'd bet money it'll be 1.6 versus 6," and now we're
Mm.
looking at over 2. Um, the thing that I'm going to be looking forward to this evening is how are they going to target it? To your point,
Right.
my hope is, this is almost $6 trillion. My hope is that we got smarter. It's a hope at this point,
Yeah.
but that's what I'll be looking for this afternoon or this evening when that data comes out.
Yeah. I mean, listen, not to throw all my multimillionaire friends under the bus, but I don't think you guys should be getting $2,000 checks from the
I
government.
agree.
you know, you know, like, like, eh,
Yeah.
so, and I don't know how you. I mean, honestly, I don't know how they. Like for me personally, and I don't know how it was for you. Like my business was online already,
Hmm.
right? So didn't really get affected, and if anything, people were home and
Yeah.
they were online. So coaching programs and things like that did fine. I was obviously when this whole thing started, I was freaking out because I thought like, oh my god, the bottom's going to fall out. Like this
Hmm.
is an expense that nobody really needs. They're all going to cancel, and some people did. Some people were forced to
Hmm.
leave the group, but for the most part, it didn't happen, and new people joined, and it was you know it was clear sailing ahead. So clearly, like I didn't need any stimulus money,
Yeah.
but and I don't know how the government could, but how they could figure that out exactly, like who should get it and who shouldn't. Uh, but clearly, like I think there has to be a better plan, and it may be the case that this doesn't happen for another 100 years. Hopefully, that's the case. But
Hmm.
if it does, we should have a plan for it the next time,
I agree.
and know how to do it without just kind of this piecemeal, like, oh, here's another trillion, here's another trillion, here's another trillion. It's just
Yeah.
it's just
Well, as we wrap up this first section, one question I know I want to ask is, do you agree? Are we on the upward trend now? So 965, it'll be something greater than that next week. Do you think this was an anomaly, kind of a catch up week? Where is your head at as you
I
look at what's coming
I mean,
next week?
I think the claims are going to continue to be high. I don't know if we're going to go over a million or not, but I think it is winter time. That just makes it more difficult to you know in cold weather states. It's just hard to sit outside and eat when it's 30 degrees outside. I did it the other day. It was cold.
I bet. Yeah.
And you know, it just I think people's appetite for doing that is clearly a lot less than it was in the summertime when it was
Right.
almost like a party atmosphere in the streets of New York with people eating outside, and um, just can't do that now. So I think until the weather warms up again, I think I would say through March, we're going to be seeing tough numbers, and then when the weather gets warmer, it'll be better, and hopefully, by March, those vaccines will have been rolled out pretty well. I mean, I'm already seeing Facebook friends saying, "Hey, like I'm now eligible for the vaccine. I went and got it, even though they're not in any of the specialized categories anymore."
Yeah.
So hopefully, by March, we'll really have substantial rollout and substantial compliance with it, and we'll be able to start opening
Yeah.
things up and going back to normal. I mean, I think one thing
Sure.
before we close the segment, I do think that once we put this behind us, right, there is going to be an enormous unleashing of pent up demand uh, in the economy, and it's going to be interesting because the pent up demand, I think, is going. Typically, you think of pent up demand, it's like people not buying stuff that they wanted to buy, like TVs and washing machines and stuff like that. People have been buying TVs and washing machines and stuff all along, right? That has manufacturing has actually been in pretty good shape
Hmm.
throughout this whole thing, and a lot of manufacturers have switched into other. So like a lot of you know, even though it turned out that say like the liquor industry wound up doing super well, a lot of them also switched into making hand sanitizer,
Right.
right? So they really had a boom, right? So they're selling out everything that they could, all the booze they could make, plus they're selling out all the hand sanitizer they could make. So there's that kind of stuff too. So there's definitely winners. Actually, an interesting. Sorry, I'm getting a little sidetracked, but I thought this is interesting to note. I've got a good friend who helps New York State. Basically works for the state of New York, promoting the wine industry in New York, right? Which is a growing industry. We're the second biggest wine producing state. A
Oh,
lot of people don't realize that.
no idea.
And have a there's like 6 different wine regions in New York State, and so anyway, they were very concerned because a lot of the wineries were dependent on these bus tours where people would roll in buses and they'd do a tasting and then they'd roll into the next place. And so, but they had to shut all that down. What happened? So of course everybody thought like, oh my God, all the wineries are going to go out of business. They stopped these bus tours. They started scheduling people by reservation. What they found out was that when you have people sit down and they do a tasting and they have some food, they spend much more money than
Hmm.
they did when they rolled in with a bus, did a tasting for $3 or $6 and rolled out. So they're probably never going to go back to the bus tours because they're actually making more money. But they never would have without COVID, they never would have
Yeah.
realized
That
this,
was the
right?
accepted practice. Yeah. It's interesting.
Yeah. So that was how they thought we'd get as many people in, but they were doing like really like high volume, low sales. And now they're like, boy, this is so much better. It's like there's less cleaning to do, there's less like hassle with all these like people drunk showing up on a bus. It's like a much more like civilized, like, and the spend is much higher. So they're like, why are we going to go back? So there've been some changes to COVID. But anyway, what I wanted to say though is that I think the pent up demand is really about like going out to eat, traveling,
Oh, for
getting on a
sure.
plane,
It's the
going to a
experiences.
hotel.
We have missed
Yeah, it's all that stuff.
experiences. Yeah.
Yeah, it's all that stuff that people have. So I think, for those restaurants and whatnot that have managed to survive, and actually what we're seeing in New York is a lot of restaurants have just decided like we're just going on hiatus. So they
Mm.
haven't gone out of business, but they've just shut down till March,
Hmm.
and they, they're like, okay, we've got enough cash in the bank just to pay the rent, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to just keep on paying our rent, and then we reopen in the spring. And so I think that to the extent that the restaurants and stuff survive, a lot of those places are going to be booming once COVID is behind us,
Yeah.
right? So I think that's where the pent up demand is going
Yeah.
to show itself.
Yeah, I guess what I'll wrap this one up is I think January is going to be a rough month for unemployment claims. We're kind of paying the sins of the past months just as we go forward. I
Yeah,
still continually think that Q1 will be better than Q4, Q2 better than Q1, Q3 better than Q2. I think brighter days are ahead. But that's where we're at. So thank you very much for episode 1.
absolutely.